What is up, A-Push people? I hope you guys are having a um, great week. We are digging deep today onto the agitation of slavery, specifically the fugitive slave law and other things that agitated this whole debate during this time period. So, without further ado, let's get started. For a brief period, the 4 years between the Compromise of 1850 and the Kansas-Nebraska Act, political tension subsided for a few years. However, the enforcement of the fugitive slave law, which was a part of the Compromise of 1850, if you would recall, and the publication of best-selling books like Uncle Tom's Cabin, Narrative Life of Frederick Douglass, kept the slavery question in the forefront of public attention in both the North and South. So slavery never went away from the thoughts in people's minds. So, fugitive slave law. The passage of a strict fugitive slave law persuaded many Southerners to accept the loss of California to the abolitionists and free soilers. Yet, the enforcement of the new law in the North was bitterly and sometimes forcibly resisted by this anti-slavery Northerners. In effect, therefore, enforcement of the new law drove a wedge between the North and the South. The law's chief purpose was to track down runaway fugitive slaves who had escaped to a northern state, capture them, and return them to the southern owners. The law placed fugitive slave cases under the executive judiciary of the federal government and authorized special U.S. commissioners to issue warrants to arrest fugitives. Captured persons who claimed to be a free African American and not a runaway slave were denied the right of trial by jury. Citizens who attempted to hide a runaway or obstruct enforcement of the law were subject to heavy penalties. So, the anti-slavery North did not like this law that much. Let's shift gears, still on topic though, but this underground railroad system. I know you guys have heard about the underground railroad before. The Underground Railroad, a fabled network of conductors and stations, were a loose network of northern free blacks and courageous ex-slaves with the help of some white abolitionists who helped escaped slaves reach freedom in the North or in Canada. The most famous conductor was an escaped woman called Harriet Tubman, who made at least 19 trips to the South to help some 300 slaves escape. Free blacks in the North and abolitionists also organized vigilance committees to protect fugitive slaves from the slave catchers. Once the Civil War broke out, African American leaders such as Frederick Douglass, Harriet Tubman, and Sojourner Truth continued to work for the emancipation of slaves and to support black soldiers in the Union cause. So the Underground Railroad shifted escaped slaves who wanted to run away to the North through the process of secretive routes. The books on slavery was Uncle Tom's Cabin, Impeding Crisis of the South. I'm assuming you guys heard of Uncle Tom's Cabin before, so let's jump right in. The most influential book of its day was a novel about a conflict between an enslaved man named Tom and a brutal white slave owner, Simon Leger. The publication of Uncle Tom's Cabin in 1852 by the Northern writer Harriet Beecher Stowe moved a generation of Northerners as well as many Europeans to regard all the slave owners as monstrously cruel and inhumane. Southerners condemned the untruths in the novel and looked upon it as one more proof of the North's incurable prejudice against the Southern way of life. Later, when President Lincoln met the author, he is reported to have said, "So you're the little woman who wrote the book that made this great war." Because this book was not just a book, it was one of the many, many actions before the Civil War that led us to the Civil War, because it pitted the North anti-slavery with the South and their slavery way of life. They pitted those two against each other in this book. The second book was Impeding Crisis of the South. Although it did not appear until 1857, Hinson R. Helper's book of nonfiction, Impeding Crisis of the South, attacked slavery from another angle. The author, a native of North Carolina, used statistics to demonstrate to fellow Southerners that slavery weakened the South's economy. Southern states acted quickly to ban this book, but it was widely distributed in the North by anti-slavery and free soil leaders. So they attacked. You can look in the textbook on the chapter folder. You can look at his statistics, and he proved that the Southern's economy, because back then more cotton, more slaves equals more money. That was the economic philosophy of the South back then. So he wanted to disrupt that philosophy. Responding to the Northern literature that condemned slavery as evil, pro-slavery Southern whites counterattacked by arguing that slavery was just the opposite, a positive good for slave and master alike. I can't tell you how bad this is, how bad thinking this is, how inhumane this is. I can go down the list. But we just have to read it because it's history. So, they argued that slavery was sanctioned by the Bible and was firmly grounded in philosophy and history. Southern authors contrasted the conditions of Northern wage workers, wage slaves, forced to work long hours in factories and mines, with the family bonds that could develop on plantations between slave and master. Familial, like close bonds. George Fitchoff, the boldest and best known of the pro-slavery authors, questioned the principle of equal rights for unequal men and attacked the capitalist wage system as worse than slavery. So, their way of defending, they use the Bible as a defense towards slavery in very twisted minds. So the fugitive slave law, combined with the anti-slavery and pro-slavery literature, polarized the nation even more. Northerners who had earlier scorned abolition became more concerned about slavery as a moral issue, because the South was making it a moral issue by using the Bible to defend slavery, which is crazy. At the same time, a growing number of Southerners became convinced that the North's goal was to destroy the institution of slavery and the way of life based upon it. So, very, very deep seeds of division. We are going to further analyze these new divisions in the next couple of videos leading up to the Civil War. Love you guys.